Well, thanks for joining, everyone. This is Martin Ravinsky. I'm the CEO at boardsi, and just been looking forward to introducing Ben from Shaparency and Shaparency software and the future of the digital boardroom. Um, that's Ben Nowlan, and again, I'm Martin Ravinsky. Ben.
Nice to meet you, everyone. Okay, over to you,
So
Martin.
Yeah. So imagine a world where boardrooms operate completely digitally. Everything you could need ready at a touch of a button through a reliable, secure, and transparent platform. After all, how can we expect companies to fully digitize if their CEOs and boards are still stuck in analog? So this is a really important part, obviously, of running a board. That's something that we've been running into when we bring on a company, and a lot of times, one of the questions we do ask is who their current advisors are and what are their solutions for running their boardroom, or if they don't have one, what's their future. So recently, Shaparency has been part of that trend and us introducing them to Shaparency. Some of the trends that we have seen just here at boardsi in 2020, obviously the year of COVID, um, the world was asking a lot of questions. The first couple months were pretty unstable all over the place. Nobody really knew where it was going to go. But the one transformation that we have noticed is everybody obviously moved towards a digital world of digital Zoom meetings and webinars and boards meeting, no longer traveling and meeting person to person, but actually meeting on Zoom calls or other webinar solutions. 2020 basically set a pace, and companies have been seeking board advisors or board members. And we see 2021 as an even stronger year for building a board of advisors. We highly now recommend that in 2021, any company should start out in a digital world. And when you start digital, you stay digital. And it's never too late to get started. The sooner the better. So if you already have a board of advisors and you've been running it and you're not doing it digitally, you're doing it the old fashioned way, then it's probably time to start looking into that solution. And this is why this webinar is here. Ben?
Over to me. Thank you, Martin. Bear with us, by the way, as I get Martin to click through the slides. It's always not the smoothest when you're going through it from two different ends. But look, the purpose of my part of the presentation today is to talk about not only why I'm quite excited and I guess bullish on the board and somewhat associated governance technology space, but actually why I think we're here. And so at the end of this, I really want you thinking about like what role you're playing in your board to drive change, and we'll talk about all the different levers of that. For me, where this came from was actually, for most of my career, I focused on effectively digital transformation, whatever it's a company I built or something I was selling. What I learned very early on was that if the board themselves, and I now know even more about that with some of the stats we're about to go through, if the boards themselves were not engaged in the concept of digital transformation, or at a minimum it wasn't a conversation, you actually found that translated out throughout the company. And there's some good examples I'll talk about, particularly my many years working across retail tech. And so when I come to thinking about where we are now in 2021, I nearly said 2020, in 2021, it really is the time to think about how boards are not there as a set of guardrails and a stopgap. They're actually there as a major catalyst for how companies will look at playing formative roles in their own industries and and how they drive their own culture around digitization. So, that's the sort of trend for me. This presentation isn't just about a new widget and technology. It's actually about what's the culture and the thinking that happens at the board that drives digital transformation. So I hope that's what you get. And obviously, towards the end, feel free to post your questions. I've seen we've got a couple of more people who just joined in there, Martin. You can also post your questions in the chat group. Martin will call them out. If you have a specific question or a point to share, I know there's a couple of people in here that I know personally. Feel free to prompt us if you have anything that you want to say. Next slide, Martin. So the obvious thing of where we have been and where we're going has been where the board's agenda has been, and this is something that I've experienced personally growing a company and selling it. That I spent more time talking to directors around this, and we recognise that this happens obviously right up to listed companies and the importance of that. But what you'll see in the ensuing slide, Martin, is that there's a huge gap between the focus on, and this is not to come at the cost of any other priorities in the board, is that the focus on other technologies and other agendas is far outweighed by the focus on governance and the focus on risk and all those other safeguarding elements at a board. In fact, I think it's less than 37% of boards are actually discussing the technology that's disrupting their own industry, right? And that's from Deloitte, and I find that quite fascinating. And so this isn't a story of just what they're discussing at a board. In fact, the biggest driver behind all of this, which I'm most passionate about, is actually diversity. It's diversity of thought, and that's one thing we talk a lot about at Shaparency. Diversity of thought, it's diversity of race, it's diversity of gender, because why technology conversation has not changed in the boardroom, or hasn't been at the forefront, I should say, is because the average board is made up of the same people in actually most of the Western countries. The average demographic of a board member in the US is a 61-year-old white male, and it hasn't changed now in many, many years. In fact, that part is increasing. There is slight increases in race and ethnicity, but we're not actually changing the mix that much. That's having a formative impact. So we're not actually changing how we're thinking at a board. And in fact, the seats, how long people stay in a board, I was reading something before this, the average board tenure in the US is 5 years, but 49% of people think that someone else on the board needs to change, obviously just not themselves, right? So they're all there for 5 years. So, but this is why we're not seeing a big shift. And technology in this space, in fact, there is someone on this call that could add a lot of value to this part of the conversation. The technology in this space, I feel, has been quite stagnant for quite some time. And I'll make a point on this slide here as well. You've got sort of broad elements of the value chain and what companies are using. There's entity management technology, there's board technology, and I'm seeing a really increasing focus on board performance technology. And if you look at the data around the previous slide, which was 37% of boards are not actually discussing technologies disrupting their industries. And also boards that have greater than 3 women are performing, 38% better. Then why is the needle not shifting more, right? And I'm not sure for those that are listening in that actually thought this is what this conversation was going to be about, because this all leads to the outcome that we want as a company at Shaparency. At the end of this is adopting technology that's going to transform the boards no matter what over the next 5 to 10 years, because it's not just technology that's going to make the shift. It's going to be the natural change in what's happening at a board level anyway. And so with the increase on focus, the increase on diversity, I see a really interesting industry and an interesting opportunity with companies that are able to actually start making boards way more dynamic. Next slide, Martin. So what I also find interesting, which is actually one of the probably one of the greatest points that I was thinking about when I was looking at an industry that I think is kind of the last frontier of digitization. When I talked before about spending most of my career in digital transformation effectively, and a great example on all of this around companies that are not discussing technology transformation, companies that are not speaking to their consumers. A great example is where I spent a good 10 years is in retail technology. If you look at what the retail sector as a whole juxtaposed against Amazon has done, and I spent many of my years talking into boardrooms of independent retailers in Australia, the UK, and the US, telling me that, there's no way that, Amazon will do that much damage to us. We like footfall in store. We don't need that. We sell this and that. We've got a flagship store on Oxford Street or George Street, And so I heard this so many times, and I should just say back to these board members and CEOs, I honestly think you're putting your head in the sand. But that conversation was not just because it's not because they didn't have a digital transformation expert that they'd hired from somewhere else, or the CEO didn't have the view that they should do something. It's because the boards themselves didn't quite understand. They'd met their metrics for some time, and then a lot of what was happening was meeting their intermittent goals, but they weren't looking 5 or 10 years ahead. But what I'm saying now is this is already happening in most industries. And when 50 to 75% of our global consumer base will be made up of Gen Z and millennials by 2025, and the average demographic of a board member in the US, but also Australia and also the UK is exactly the same as a 61-year-old white male, how are we talking to our consumer base, right? Whatever they are, whether it's telcos, whether it's direct-to-consumer products, we're just not meeting the point. And so that's where, today's conversation around digital transformation is actually more about how you play a role in your board, shifting some of the really key levers around who's on that board, how you're measuring performance, and how you're driving a conversation of technology that actually is going, hang on, where should we be? And this doesn't matter whether you're a small, reasonably well-funded startup, or whether you're a couple of $100 million private company, or you're even listed, or even a not-for-profit, which are a good proportion of our customers. This conversation is all relevant. Martin, next. So, as we said at the beginning, it was going to be short and punchy. There's obviously, a few more points we can go through, but what I focused on, which I hope has come through today, and please, I don't know, I haven't checked chat, Martin, but if you've got questions, throw them over. Diversity is the key, and I'm not jumping on a bandwagon for the sake of it, but it actually is diversity in many ways, because naturally, if you've got diversity in all forms, thought, gender, race, you're naturally going to start having conversations. There's a great quote in from one of a US female director. She says, if you're sitting in a boardroom as a male and you're looking across the table at 6 other males and you don't think something's wrong, then you've got a big problem, right? And so that's a really important point, and then have a forward stance on technology. So what we can say as a business, I speak to 20 to 30 plus organizations a week across multiple countries. And, it surprises me the tools that we are not using. And in fact, where we are now versus the start of 2020 is a good 20% different. And again, there's a couple of people on this call I know could validate that is in similar industries as Martin and I are, we've actually have jumped forward because of COVID into a digital sphere. At a minimum, people are using Zoom and Dropbox at a minimum, which is great, and the last part is sometimes people are questioning what's the old way versus the new way and why should I change? There was always risk and there's inertia to change. I mean, I'd like to always jump to the last point. I'd rather do something digital than printing 1,000 pages for a board pack, which is quite common. In fact, we've got a great white paper on the fact that the average board meeting can cost 1 to 3 actual trees in CO2 emissions. Whether you're printing board packs, traveling to the meeting, staying in hotels, it's actually reasonably easy to quantify. And when we've got to change that, but obviously it just saves you time and money. And and I could get into the detail of why going digital is more governance effective because everything's tracked. I probably skipped the concept of talking about blockchain tonight, which is something we're focused on at Shaparency. But, going digital naturally means, you are more secure. You are more effective in terms of whether you need to audit. In fact, most cyber attacks happen at a non-exec level because they're usually the most technology deficient, if I will. And then that's it from me. And I'm quite happy to jump in and show the platform. Is that what we want to do, Martin?
Yeah, I think we should definitely do that. And I was about to hand that off to you right now.
So I'll only do 30 seconds to a minute. And again, I'll please post questions if necessary. Really, this is just to cap off, what we've been talking about from a technology perspective, but more about the philosophy behind why you should make a change. And tell me when I'm ready.
You should be ready.
Okay. So for those on the call, what you can see in the platform and what we hear every day is, okay, so outside of using Dropbox and Google Drive and Teams and things like that, what are we doing in here? And the focus here is not to replace those tools. In fact, we've integrated some of those already. It's about creating a central hub for boards to start operating and being more governance strong. It's more secure. All your activities are operating in here. You're bringing all your committees, your advisory groups into this space. You're communicating with them. You're chatting with them. You're sharing documents securely with them. You're running your meetings from here. You're running, we think of it more of a productivity and collaboration tool. In fact, we steer away from the word governance because that scares people. Governance is as friendly as death is, and we hear that a lot. So it absolutely is about how do we be more effective? Running, storing all your documents and managing them and bringing them in from Dropbox or Google Drive, whatever it is that you're using, running those agendas, building those board packs, signing documents, taking your minutes out after you've drafted them, getting them in to be e-signed, soon to be digital signed, voting on them, and these are all the core activities. And what we hear a lot from our customers is that, effectively, if you're running a board, you know how to use our platform, which is, very different from the general, offerings that are on the market. But I wanted to give you a quick taste of what we've been doing around and then how we serve our customers. Because, you're creating these meetings, integrating your calendars, integrating your Zoom conversation, your Zoom accounts. So one click creating agendas, board packs, and sending out calendar invites and Zoom links all in the one go. And it's all stored, it's all tracked, versioning history. And that's what we're about here. That, for me, that is the future of how we're going to be running boards. I don't think it will, do it any justice to go into anything further, Martin. But look, if anyone else on the call wants to hear any more, chat, post a question, or email us after. But that is the future of the digital boardroom, effectively.
So we'll take a second. I haven't seen any Q&As come up yet. So And Ben, just in case other people weren't on, can you one more time? I know there obviously there is competition out there. There is some companies that have been around longer. They maybe haven't updated their software, but tell the story with the banker.
Yeah. Thank you for prompting me.
Yeah.
So, being a new technology business into the market, particularly when you've got organizations like Diligent and Onboard that have been around for 10 to 15 plus years, what you're asked is, what's the difference? And what I now can say is that choosing products like, Diligent and Onboard is kind of the way people chose IBM in the late 90s and early 2000s because they didn't want to lose their job, and so this is where we're sort of at. And the market has largely been served by those solutions that are quite cost prohibitive. And when you look at the market, less than 15% of boards are using any type of board technology. So it's a really open market. It's about to go through transformation, kicked off by COVID. So it's, in a good, lighted way, it's been great for us. When we're talking to companies, which we just got a new customer last week, a director of a very large not-for-profit in the US, who's also the director and chairman of 3 other boards, she was ultimately saying, right, we're going to stop our onboarding of onboard or passageways because this is such a better product. It's so much more intuitive to use. And we're now realizing, that we made a mistake. And I'm also the member of a board director of a bank. I'm going to roll you out to that as well. I can clearly. And so that's the sort of feedback that we're getting in terms of companies that have been proactive around technology and which has definitely been kicked into gear in a I guess a COVID world. They're looking for solutions that are easy to use and intuitive. And we've taken this into account when you think about the demographic that I keep talking about. And I say it somewhat in a satirical Australian joke, if you will. 61-year-old white male is the average demographic in 3 of the countries that we're operating in. It's we've purposely made the product easy to use because the reason for the lack of adoption is actually because of the technology, understanding and the fear of I just like my piece of paper and my PDF that I print off. So we get this feedback, and it's been a big focus in how we've rolled out the platform, Martin.
Awesome. And one question from me, and I know we talked about this, and being a company based out of UK, obviously your pricing online is in pounds. And are you guys rolling that out in US dollar as well?
Yeah, so we automatically convert to US whenever we price our customers because our payment gateway will do that for you. It'll actually bill you in US dollars. It's just been our resources to change our pricing page, but you will get billed in US dollars. So for our US customers, if you're a small company or a not-for-profit, you're paying only $27 a month for everything. This is 90% more cost-effective than using any other platform on the market. If you're a medium-sized business, 5 million to 25 million, you're paying us only $90 a month. And larger than that, you're only paying us a couple of $100 a month. So it is on every tier we've taken into consideration what people are paying. We're talking you could be paying thousands versus hundreds, and it's really just about how we see ourselves. We're a modern, scalable, self-service platform that allows you to get in and set up a meeting within 5 minutes versus it would take you a week to set up an account with other platforms. Okay.
And is within the pricing, I know the answer, but I figure I'll ask for them. In the pricing, is there per user? How do you structure that?
It's all inclusive. So it's at a company level. It includes, 5 gig of storage with your documents, unlimited e-signatures, unlimited contacts. Of course, over time, we will start to look at all the additional product features we're rolling in, such as integrations to board performance software, survey tools and things like that. But for now, it's all inclusive.
So in essence, simply sign up and no fear on recruiting board of advisors, board of executives, and bringing those members on, fearing that you're going to be paying more because you've built out a board of 7 people.
No, and in fact, we've created specific functionality to serve that, which is also quite unique in terms of, where the market is. We've created the ability for you to create groups, so you can segment your advisors, you can segment your audit committee, your finance committee, and we're now getting companies saying to us, in fact, I just want to roll this out to my executive group. And so you can compartmentalize all of the data so they can work together, create their own meetings, share their own documents and chat together, and feed it all up to effectively a parent level board if that's what they want to do.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps it up, Ben. I thank you for your time and thank everybody for joining us. And if you have any questions, Ben, do you want to give out your email or anything?
Yep, I'll post it in chat. It's Ben at Shaparency. I notice my accent sometimes. People don't know how to spell Shaparency, but there it is, SHAPARENCY.com. So feel free to email me about anything, whether you want to talk about partnerships, you want to be a customer, or you just, we're doing lots of collaborations around content. Feel free. I would love that. And I'll give one last shout out. If anyone wants to ask a question, you have 10 seconds to post a question. Who's on there? Marcus, Byron, Terrence. Terrence, I know. Maybe I'll call him out. Terrence, do you have any questions? There he is.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. No, so I appreciate the content here. I think Ben called it out that I'm very much a part of this, an adjacent industry that's going through a rapid digital transformation of entity management. One thing that we've been talking about to our customers is that, legal entities, which I think are really related to boards drive the actions of legal entities. Those being digitized mean a lot to basically the functioning of business across the world. We look at entities as sort of the way that people share the risk and reward of doing business worldwide. I'm curious, I appreciate the stats around performance of a company when they've got better diversity and sort of the environmental impact and all that stuff. Do you guys have a long-term bet on what the nature of, decision making or activities of a board look like once digital adoption actually happens, say 5-10 years from now?
No, actually, no. It is a really interesting point, because I can anecdotally say from what I've seen in the conversations I've had when we're talking with some companies, like McKinsey, PwC, who actually we're involved with, there's been digital adoption, which I know, Terrence, quite well from your previous life. But I don't know whether it's been focused on that previous agenda of, okay, we'll use a tool once a month to create a board pack. I don't think anything meaningful has happened around actually, how are we actually going to start using tools in our everyday life that becomes a way that drives even a cultural change throughout a company. And I sort of alluded to some of that, like how about some of the tools that are going to change the way we think even about how companies run. And I know this will happen in your world around entity management, around blockchain will play a huge role around cap tables and proxy voting and voting and document security and information management. So I think definitely we don't have the data, but I think that's what I'm referring to, unless you have something to refer to, that we're going to start to see over the next 5 years, which is why I'm quite excited about the space of, because we're going to see that data come out in the coming years.
Yeah, I think that, the way we look at it, I think it's a bit more tangible, mainly because, you know, if a legal entity is the way by which you facilitate business, right now, or maybe, you know, before now, that was a very offline process. And if you look further back into history, it was something that was just sort of not available to the wider public. That's been democratized, and now it's being digitized. And by digitizing that, you're just net increasing the efficiency and the transparency of how people can do business across the world. And so I think that kind of ties into the points you guys are making around sort of thought diversity and adoption of technology to facilitate that in the boardroom. So I was just trying to understand if you guys had sort of that long-term bet, but it sounds like we're in a bit of wait and see mode until there's more data.
What we do have is, you know, what's quite quantifiable is just what time saving is happening right now. You know, whether it's the reduction in emails, reduction in, you know, how they manage and share documents, the reduction in the time spent taking minutes, like the really practical execution points right now is and so that allows them to focus on what matters most. Because one of the points that I talked a lot about last year with boards is when we're focused on major issues like a pandemic, or when we're focused on, you know, priorities around risk and security, like I talked in the early part of the presentation, some of the other causes, such as, you know, what are our ESG commitments or CSR commitments, they actually go out the window because they spend more time on on other things. So what we are talking about is if you actually go digital and you save time, you're saving money, you're more effective, you actually can build these naturally into your board conversations and processes. So, you know, that's sort of what we're seeing in the short term, that is coming out as some data. But no, thank you for, you know, sharing what you guys see.
I have one more question too, by the way.
Yep.
Marcus is asking, any suggestions on best cap table to use for startups in Series seed round?
I mean, even Terence could. I mean, from the UK, there's different solutions because the way you know the registers work in most countries, which is why you see a company like Carter, which is probably the biggest cap table, you know, disruptor in the world, is US based predominantly, and it doesn't exist in Europe. It doesn't exist anywhere else actually. Because they all work differently in the way, you know, way those registries work. So if you're US based, you know, the one I would always jump to would be Carter. Otherwise, there is one that is out of Europe that could be more generic in terms of usage. Depends on how much of a role you want it to play. Called CapDesk as well, and it's a lot cheaper than Carter. Good
Marcus,
question.
Marcus, if you want, if that didn't answer your question, you can always email me or you can email Ben, but we can definitely chat about that. And
I'm also, I believe, Terence, I don't know if you guys do any registry data or cap table stuff. I'm also happy to bring you into that conversation because it fits within the entity management. I don't know if you have a point on that.
Yeah. So, you know, we actually, so at Athenian, we use ShareWorks, which is actually now a product of Morgan Stanley. Part of the reason we do that is because our technology is working towards a technical integration with theirs. And so where it relates to entity management, you know, our platform actually has a lot of capabilities around managing ownership of legal entities broadly within your organization. That information a lot of times is driven by the cap table. It's sort of the ownership structure above where your entities live. If that's sort of where you're starting to, you're probably the person who asked this question is probably a little bit before having to worry about that issue in terms of their age and stage, but definitely something I can chat more about offline if it's of interest.
thank you, Terence.
Terence, feel free to post your email as well in the chat.
Shall do. Yep.
Martin, shall we? I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's a wrap. I'm going to wait for Terrence to post his email, and there it is. Terrence.Falk@Athenian.com. That's a wrap. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
appreciate
guys.
everybody attending.
Thank you for
Thanks,
attending.
everyone.
See you
Take
later.
care.
Bye.
Thank you, Terrence,
Bye.
for jumping in.